like the notion of helping students or learners to understand systems and be able to manipulate within systems for variables and that sort of thing.
So far, it's very much all of the above, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
People skills. Because if you can't work with people or communicate with people, then your ideas are never going to get expressed.
You've read the book.
I think even on a more simple basis, how do we as human beings deal with fast, unexpected change? How do we feel safe? How do we feel likely to be a participating member because it's moving so fast?
Yes. Actually, I would like to editorialize just a bit on how fast it's moving. It turns out that evolution has not wired us to understand geometric progressions. It has wired us to do actually the reverse, the logarithmic progression, meaning diminishing returns sorts of situations where if you interview tribes in the Amazon jungle, they will have the concept in their language of 1, 2, 3, many. If you ask young children or even dogs, they also have the concept of 1, 2, 3. You can discriminate visually between 1, 2, 3, and then past the point like many. So we really look at large numbers as many, which explains why politicians can spend $1 billion or $1 trillion as if it's just the same number, right? It's just many. So that's how we're wired. We're wired that way. We think we're wired linearly, and we certainly don't understand geometric progressions.
My experience in schools is with a lot of testing that's done, a lot of sitting time in front of the computer for children. Is the lack of body awareness, how they are in their bodies as they sit in front of that computer?
Yes, and one of the things I'll be doing soon is working with futurists to try to understand the negative aspects of technology. Because when you start asking the question, people immediately assume you're not asking about. And yet all you're asking is saying, well, look, take a cell phone analogy. Is a cell phone held like this going to give me brain cancer? I want to know so I can at least use my earpiece or have a shield or whatever. I will still be using a cell phone. So that's really the reply to all those people who say, well, you're looking at bad aspects and therefore you are against technology. No, I just want to know how to apply it properly. Okay? Yes?
Positive purposes to help serve mankind as opposed to the destruction of values and morals and who we are as people.
And that's valid for any technology, not just now, right? The fire has been used to badly as well.
We often hear that the emotional quotient is more important for a healthy society and a healthy human than the intelligence quotient is. And I'm not sure that computers would teach us how to develop an emotional quotient.
As an educator, I'm severely confused because I went to see the movie Connect with the author, and it's about technology and it was the positive use and effects of technology. And according to the author, sorry, every time you click and you receive new information, you have increased your brain power. And I had an argument, but I didn't get very far. But in all of the aspects of students, you were talking about the interpersonal. It's not personal. The problem solving. And the creative end of it. I'm a visual art teacher, so all of the information coming in about how we've got to get back to the creative aspect of problem solving and creating and thinking outside the box and all those things that we all know. But yet at the same time, brain research shows that our kids, their brains aren't even wired like mine is. So I'm very confused as to how to approach that, and yet try to, you know, facilitate the education of these kids that they're still using the old-fashioned way of thinking and being creative.
Well, for one, going back to the argument about whether using technology enhances brain power, it's like anything you do. Anything you practice to a certain point will enhance that capability in your mind. Whatever it is. I mean, tying your shoelaces 25,000 times in a row will increase your ability to tie them, you know, in all sorts of circumstances. It's just normal. You know, so if they are geared towards using a certain form of media, communication, and so on, more frequently and from a younger age where their brains are very plastic, of course they're going to wire themselves differently from where we are. It's perfectly normal. That's normal brain plasticity. It happens just with absolutely anything we have done with them. Now, the point about it being necessarily positive, that I disagree with. As long as you, unless you consider that getting a dopamine rush every click is a good thing, necessarily. Right? So yes, you do get the dopamine rush, and that's why I check email a lot more than I should, quite honestly. And even knowing this, I try to refrain myself. Actually, I haven't checked in a while. Come to think of it. You can see I'm trembling now. So, absolutely, it's the wrong behavior. Now, it may mean that because they're living in a world of bits too much, we're going to have to push back the world of atoms back on them. And so perhaps we may need to reteach gardening and woodworking and things like this, just because if we believe that societies will be better by having more balance between the virtual and the real. And it becomes almost a question of education philosophy. But the one we embrace certainly is balance in all sorts of things. You get to education, psychosocial versus economic, all the way down to STEM versus humanities, and you'll hear a lot about that this afternoon. It's a question of balance. It's not one or the other systematic.
So Charles, let me ask you, given what we hear in the room, concerns for ethics, creative process, etc., what's your answer up here? What do we teach for?
Fluidity with technology, adaptability, resilience, factors like this that we'll be discussing a lot more during this coming part of the presentation. Bernie is going to address a lot of that. So realize how many of you have already covered some of this, right? Asking the right questions, synthesizing, creating, etc. You've all said this. So we already know the answers. It's a question of putting in place a framework that allows us to do it, right? So let's talk about the knowledge part for a moment. We really need to rethink knowledge in terms of relevance. What matters nowadays that didn't matter in 1898 or even before. Skill side, and of course the character side, so things like ethics and so on. So let's delve into it. Bernie is going to do a deep dive into the skill portion in particular. I'm going to touch upon the other two. Okay? Alright, so one aspect of this is this balance I was talking about between practical and theoretical. Education systems have erred too far, have gone too far in the direction of theoretical conceptual thinking, and that has its merits. But 75% of the population is inherently practical from a personality perspective, and so what are we doing about them, right? So again, economic versus psychosocial argument, balance between that. Well, it's not a new debate. Even as far back as Benjamin Franklin's time, British grammar schools used to consider that Latin and Greek were really mandatory. How else would you read the old text if you didn't speak Latin and Greek? It wasn't that necessary for everyone in England. However, English was not quite as necessary. That was mandatory, or was, I'm sorry, optional. Whereas Ben Franklin, who started what it has become now the University of Pennsylvania, was saying, well, no, all these things, you know, including geography and mechanics and philosophy and rhetoric and oratory and so on. And French. Top of the list. Coincidence, or coincidence. Now, this quote comes from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's a think tank in Paris that produces the famed PISA tests, among other things. This is what they have to say about school learning versus reward. I think we can all relate to that. Okay, so why is there such a mismatch? It's like a crystal, completely mismatched analysis in the crystal. Why? Well, subjects evolve very slowly. Look at this at the bottom first. From ancient Greece all the way to today, I've asked this unsuspecting but wonderfully brilliant grad student at Penn to come up with a complete synopsis of how have subjects evolved over the centuries. Mind you, I had gone to eminent historians and asked them to do the same for me for a fee, for honorarium, and they say, that can't be done. So this is where you get a lot of grad students, because they don't know that it can't be done. And they just do it, and they do it in 2 months at pretty much slave wage. So it's fabulous, and I'm very thankful to Kabira here. She's done a fabulous job showing how there are topics that we don't teach anymore. They went optional for a while, and then we don't teach them. And some that also have disappeared, like oratory and rhetoric, that we should be teaching. We call that communication, and it's taught in college, and so on. So you look at humanities, you find out that some topics have become optional, unfortunately, ethics being one of them. Very big increase, and has become less and less taught. You certainly can see a dose of that in the finance world. That's probably nice. And STEM, where the Committee of 10 introduced physics, biology, physics, and chemistry, and as well as algebra, calculus, and so on. So that has evolved slowly, and is this really appropriate for today?